The power of a woman is in her brain. The brains of men and women are different. This is not just my opinion, this is fact. There are particular strengths in the brain of either gender, of course, which makes them equally valuable, but they're definitely different. And the power of a woman is in these brain differences. But Dr. G, you might say, what is your hardcore evidence this is true? Well, research indicates that the brain, or parts of the brain, are bigger in women and some in men. In women, for example, the hippocampus is generally larger. Now, the hippocampus is kind of, if I drew, or like one of those old comedy skits, shoved a nail through my head about here and down from the top, the hippocampus is about in there. The hippocampus is one of the brain's major memory centers. Women remember things, or to be more precise, they don't forget certain things, especially if the memory is charged with emotion. I've got two examples for you. When I was first married, I remember one day my wife came up to me with this look in her eye, kind of a cross look, and said, "Do you remember what you said to me on April 5th, 1982? My eyes went wide and I said, "No." Were we married then? I couldn't remember the incident she was describing, but it obviously meant something to her, so it recorded in her brain, and how it made her feel was bonded to the experience. If you're a man in a relationship, or ever have been in one, have you ever forgotten your partner's birthday, your anniversary, or heaven forbid, Valentine's Day? She may say she's forgiven you, but did she forget? And women, be honest, you may have eventually forgiven them, but did you actually forget? It's been my own personal experience that the answer is not a snowball's chance in hell. I'm Canadian, and if I turned this laptop around and showed you outside, you'd see. Now here's the second example, clinical example. I've seen thousands of patients in my practice, thousands. And I remember this couple. I was consulting with them. They came in, and it was kind of a consultation between the two of them, but he was standing in front of me, and she was sitting down behind him. And he was talking about his wife in a rather derogatory manner. He was just throwing little barbs about her, right? He was taking verbal jabs, being a bit of a jackass, if you ask me. After a while, I said to him, "You really don't value your sex life, do you?" He stopped and he looked at me with a very quizzical look on his face. And I said, "You think it's funny, but you're being hurtful, and you're doing it right in front of me. She will never forget this, and it'll come back to bite you in the ass." And when I looked at her, she was doing this right behind him. The other area of the brain that appears to be larger in women, and this is a biggie, is the prefrontal cortex right here, or the PFC, the so-called executive function of the brain. It's the executive control part. It's like the CEO of the brain. It functions to regulate higher brain functions like focus, forethought, judgment, organization, planning, impulse control, and empathy. And remember the last one in particular, empathy. Now, I'm not saying that women have more executive ability than men. That's not what I'm saying, by virtue of having the bigger PFC. Although I have seen researchers who hypothesize that women could make better bosses because of it. However, in my own mind, what makes the biggest difference is what the PFC is actually composed of. That's what makes the difference. Turns out that women have more of a concentration of what's called their white matter in the PFC. The connections to other areas of the brain, the wiring, goes to other areas. And it's my personal opinion that this ability to access other areas of the brain may explain why in women they have a higher level, usually, of empathy. They consider others. This is a superpower if there ever was one. And also the ability to access information in other areas of the brain while making decisions. So when do these differences begin? Well, according to science, they begin in utero. The sex of the baby, of course, is determined at conception. You either are XX or XY. If a young man would ask me, why am I a guy? I would say, exactly. It's that pesky Y that makes all the difference. Because that Y chromosome, should you have it, turns on testosterone production between the weeks 18 and 26 in utero during gestation. This testosterone production during this time irreversibly transforms the brain into a male brain. I'm going to say that again. Irreversibly transforms that brain into a male brain when you have a Y. As a result, by 26 weeks, you can determine by ultrasound or by SPECT scan the difference between male and female brains. So at 26 weeks, you can tell if you have a male brain or a female brain, or if you're male or female, if you want to look at it that way. So a man literally becomes a man inside a woman. Now, that didn't sound so good. I think that was a discussion that my father and I had when I was about 18, so we'll ignore that for now. Men generally have a larger hypothalamus, which is deep in the brain as well, regulating sexual behavior. And larger parietal lobes, which are on the sides, which have more to do with spatial perception and depth perception and how the space in between certain objects. I look at it this way. The H in hypothalamus stands for horny or more sex-driven. I mean, I've raised 4 beautiful daughters, and I told them all, just be aware that any man 25 and under is simply a walking erection looking for a place to put it. So I know what sex-driven means. I remember. Parietal, or the P in parietal, means parking ability. In other words, when parking a car, they can judge spatial differences, usually better than women do. Not all, please don't. I'm just generalizing, okay? So in other words, men may think about sex when they're parking the car. Just kidding, men think about sex most of the time, including when they're parking the car. Generally speaking, women tend to be, or appear to be, less chronically horny or sex-driven than men, or maybe they can push it down better, and may have more trouble parking without parking assist, of course. Why does this matter, you ask? Well, men and women are equal in intelligence overall, but they use different parts of the brain to solve problems and achieve goals. This has ramifications for virtually every aspect of life, including health and relationships. And more on this later in other YouTube episodes. In summary then, because I like to give a summary, testosterone production in the womb, dictated by that pesky Y chromosome, irreversibly transforms the brain into a male brain by the 26th week in utero. Irreversibly. Women have a bigger hippocampus and prefrontal cortex. Their brains will retain memories, especially if they have high emotional content. In other words, they may forgive, but they won't forget. Think of it that way. And they have the ability to integrate information from other parts of the brain better than men do, potentially allowing them to be more empathetic when making decisions, which I also consider a superpower. Men generally have larger parietal lobes and hypothalamus, which means that they may be better at parking the car without parking assist, and doing it while they're thinking of sex. Hopefully that'll help you remember it. Stay tuned for the next episode called Gray Matter, White Matter, Does It Really Matter? Until next time, I am Dr. G, the Reality Doctor.